Welcome to DairyPod, a podcast series from Dairy Australia. Featuring a range of experts, each episode offers insights into Australia's unique dairy farming conditions, as well as personal experiences and the latest in dairy innovation.
Hello everyone and welcome to DairyPod. My name is John Penry. I'm the Principal Scientist for Dairy Australia, and joining me today is from the University of Sydney, Professor Richard Trethowan, who is also part of the Plant Breeding Institute at the University of Sydney. And Richard has joined us today because he is involved with a 5-year research program being run at the University of Sydney and in New South Wales in conjunction with other research partners called DairyUP. And in particular, Richard is here today to speak to us about one of the projects, unlocking the potential of Kikuyu. Richard, thanks very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, John.
Richard, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself just by way of introduction before we get into the actual project itself?
Well, I'm actually a newcomer to dairy, I have to confess. I have spent most of my career breeding cereals, wheat in particular, both here in Australia and internationally. And it was DairyUP that brought me into the Kikuyu fold, or the dairy fold, I guess, through Kikuyu grass. And I think wheat is a grass, Kikuyu is a grass, rice is a grass. They all had a common ancestor. And I thought this would be relatively easy, but I've learned that Kikuyu has particular challenges as well.
That's terrific. Richard, can you describe a little bit by way of background? What's the importance of Kikuyu as it relates to the New South Wales or the subtropical dairy industry? As I
understand it, I mean it's an important pasture grass. What I understood when I was asked to think about participating in the DairyUP program, my understanding was that there was a perception that there wasn't that much genetic diversity out there on dairy farms for Kikuyu grass, because there had been a cultivar with it released some 40 years ago, and there's been a few more recent releases, but we weren't sure just what the penetration had been like on farm, and so we thought that it would be good to look at that diversity on farm just to get an understanding of what we're dealing with, and whether or not some new Kikuyu materials, I should say, Kikuyu materials that were developed at the Plant Breeding Institute by a couple of our PhD students, whether they might have some applicability in the dairy industry, given that it is an important pasture grass.
Richard, when you talk about new plant varieties, is it right to call them cultivars, or is that the wrong term to use?
Well, at this point, these are strains, if you like. They're not released. They're not varieties yet. So we're looking at new genetic strains. So what our students have done over a period of years is collect some different diversity from around the state and made a number of crosses among the different materials, largely initially to produce new turf grasses, because a local turf company, Hatton's, was funding the research. They were supporting the PhD students. But of course, when you select turf types out of a population, you also discover that there are types that look like pasture grasses in there, that have pasture grass characteristics. So we thought, well, my goodness, maybe these have potential. They're potentially genetically different. They might have potential in the dairy industry.
So, Richard, when it comes to these new strains, what are the types of things that you're looking to assess in those strains as part of this multi-year research that go to inform whether it would be seen to be a superior type of Kikuyu to use relative to the more established wheated variety that's already there? What are the types of things that you're measuring and assessing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, the first thing we did was to look at the DNA. make sure that what we were looking at was substantially different to Wittet, to the Bill Fulkerson line and other materials. So that was the first thing. If it's genetically different, then I think it's worth pursuing. If they were somewhat similar, then it probably wouldn't add that much more value to the market. Then we decided to look at biomass development, so dry matter development, right through the season, from early in the season through to late in the season, to see whether there were any differences there. And we did find some differences with small plot trials that we ran at a single location initially. We've since extended that testing to multiple environments, to different environments around the state on a larger scale. We're also looking at nutritional value through a chemical analysis to see whether there are some advantages there that we might be able to take advantage of, and disease resistance, obviously very important. So specifically black spot and Kikuyu yellows. The other interesting thing, there is an overlap too, I should say, between what we're doing and one of the other programs in DairyUP that is looking at the problem of toxicity, poisoning. And we're also trying to determine whether the variety or the genetic strain has an influence on the expression of toxicity.
Richard, do we know much about Kikuyu toxicity? It's certainly something that's been talked about in the industry for many years. Well, certainly the last 30, 35 years, etc. Do we know much about toxicity and what are the mechanisms behind it in Kikuyu? Is it something that's still to be discovered?
Well, I think it's still something we're trying to discover. Our PhD student that sort of sits between the two programs, who was looking at this, is trying to discount different things. We're trying to discount disease, physiological impacts of factors in the environment, the physiological responses to the environment. We're trying to discount the variety as having an influence. So I think the way we're doing this is bit by bit sort of deciding that, no, this factor doesn't influence toxicity, and then writing that off and then going to the next one. But no, it's an interesting one as far as I understand. There's most people that we still don't know why.
So Richard, having started off with multiple new strains that were bred some years ago at the Plant Breeding Institute, where's the research up to now? My understanding is that you've now advanced to some on-farm strip plot trials where cows are used as well. Can you give us a sense of where the research is up to now?
Well, initially, as I said, we started with these small plot trials. So we had a larger number of materials, and we tested them at one location, and we used a lawnmower to measure biomass throughout the season, and we did that for 2 years. We were able to narrow that down to 3 candidate lines. These 3 lines, compared to the checks, appeared in the small plot trials to have some real potential. They'd produce more biomass, more cumulative biomass, a little bit earlier in the season. They were disease resistant, and based on the initial chemical analyses, looked like they had some important properties that might be advantageous. So what we did then was to take those 3 candidate lines and plant them along with Wittet in replicated strip trials on 3 farms, one at Bega, one at Berry, and one at Camden. And those strip trials, those strips are replicated, and we ran an electric fence wire down the middle, and one half is grazed and the other half is mowed to accurately measure the biomass. And the grazed section follows farmer practice completely. So whatever farmer practice is, if they sow ryegrass in winter, oversow with ryegrass, then that happens. If they don't, then they don't. So we're trying to get a sense of farmer practice, what happens, and on the other side of the electric fence, a good understanding, a quantitative understanding of how much more biomass is being produced.
Can you give us any insights, Richard, into how the results are shaping up? I'm sure listeners would be interested in that.
Yeah, well, we're 1 year in. Last year was a very wet year, so it was somewhat atypical, I would say. We did not see any significant differences in dry matter production. So that is at the beginning of the season, mid-season, late season, cumulative dry matter. The check and the three candidate lines were pretty much the same. So yeah, it was maybe a little atypical this season. We're going to run it again this year to see whether we see that again, that same response. However, when we take the dry matter samples, we're also sampling for the chemical analysis to look at nutritional value, and that material has not yet been analysed. It's in the lab at the moment, and we hope to get some data on that, because I think one of the advantages, biomass is one thing, but if the nutritive value of the pasture is better, or the dry matter is better, well, that's a significant advantage. We also tested the material under disease inoculation, so very high inoculation pressure, under control conditions, and we found the three lines were certainly better for black spot. They had a superior rating for black spot, and one of the lines was significantly better for Kikuyu yellows. Now, under control conditions, we generated some incredibly intense epidemics, artificial epidemics, and what we're going to do in the coming season is put that inoculation experiment in the field under more realistic conditions where the epidemic is not so intense, just to have a look and see whether we're getting the same sorts of responses. So I guess in short, John, I would say that in terms of dry matter, they're all comparable in terms of dry matter. There may be an advantage from on the nutritive side, and there does appear to be a definite advantage in their disease resistance.
Good. Thanks, Richard. And I presume that the research project team have also contemplated what the path to a commercial bag of seed could look like over the next 1 or 2 years as this multi-year research project wraps up.
Yes, we have, and I did mention Hatton's Turf as one of our partners, a long-term partner, particularly in terms of breeding turf, potential turf strains. They also have an interest in taking this to the dairy industry as well. So we let Hatton's know where things are at. In fact, they're only visiting us last week to have a look at the latest results and the latest material. And so we expect that the new seed, the new Kikuyus, should they go to market, will be marketed through Hatton's.
Terrific. Well, Richard, thanks very much for giving that summary to us. I know that the project Unlocking the Potential of Kikuyu is only but one of the what was originally 10 projects that sits within the whole DairyUP program. It's been the largest investment in dairy research in New South Wales, certainly in the last 5 years, if not probably the last 15 to 20 years. And we really appreciate your time and thank you for sharing the story about the work that you're doing into new Kikuyu strains and where that might lead. We really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you for joining today's Dairy Pod episode. We hope you found it enjoyable and insightful. For more information, check out the episode notes. You can stay up to date by following Dairy Pod on your favourite podcast platform. To get in touch, visit dairyaustralia.com.au. Until next time, take care.